Good afternoon, and we are now at the 8th Eagle of the Day Baton Cleanup. Major Ed Freeman was born in 1927 in Neely, Mississippi. At age 17, he enlisted in the Navy during the closing years of World War II. After 2 years, he returned home to finish high school. And following high school, he re-enlisted, this time in the Army, and served in Europe and then in Korea, where he earned a battlefield career commission at the base of Pork Chop Hill. As an officer, he was now eligible to attend flight school, and in 1955, he earned his wings. After serving in many assignments in both fixed wings and helicopters, literally mapping the world, he shipped off to Vietnam in 1965. The fateful events of November 14th through the 16th, 1965 were depicted in the movie We Were Soldiers, where he was honored with the Medal of Honor. He is an Army aviator with over 18,000 helicopter hours and resides in Boise, Idaho with his lovely wife, Barbara, with whom he just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Major Ed Too Tall Freeman. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
I think they want you to stand back up.
I got a wife out there somewhere.
She's standing right there. If you want to
I
raise
see
her.
her.
There she is. We can sit down now. Now, Major Freeman, at age 17, you dropped out of high school and enlisted in the Navy. However, as a young boy, you saw these great Louisiana maneuvers going on and wanted to be a soldier. Why did you go in the Navy?
My mother, well, I had two brothers in the military, one in the Navy, one in the Army. And the one in the Army got hit on Luzon with a grenade in the face, and the one in the Philippines was in the Navy, and he didn't get hurt. So she allowed us how that was the safest thing I could do, was go in the Navy.
And what were your experiences like in the Navy?
Boring. I was on the USS Cacapon, A052. It was 510 feet long, and if you've ever been on a tub like that, you get to scrape the deck and repaint it about every week. And it's very boring, and I didn't know if we moved during the night because it looked the same the next morning when I woke up. So I didn't appreciate the ocean, and I still haven't been on a cruise. I'm sorry, Barb, because I don't particularly care for ships that much.
Well, after 2 years, the Navy released you, and you got to go back and finish high school. And you, this time, re-enlisted into the Army, and you went over to Germany in the Corps of Engineers, and were able to train for the Soviet fight there. And you rapidly moved through ranks. I think it was 4 years and 11 months from corporal to first sergeant. Private to first sergeant. And what would you say was the secret to that?
You know, I paid attention a little bit in the Navy, and I learned a lot that you're in a good organization depending on what you make of it. And I studied hard. I learned all the rules. I tried to go to every school that they would allow me to go to that would improve my ability to do the job that I was assigned to do, be it build bridges, blow up tanks, or whatever it was, laying minefields. And I also volunteered to teach all courses that we would have, and that's all we did was train, by the way, for 4 years. And I volunteered to teach any training program that we had, and if I didn't know it, I would study at night and learn. And I particularly enjoyed the hand-to-hand combat because we had a big red-headed first lieutenant that I just loved to throw around legally.
So we ended up, in 1951, you were in Korea. And some events unfolded that gave you a small bug to fly. What was that?
Due to poor equipment, my feet got frostbitten, and they summoned a helicopter to come pick me up. And this dude landed, and he had a leather jacket on, a baseball cap, clean shaven, looked clean, and he apparently had been fed pretty well, too. I said, got to be one of them. but it took a while.
Later on in your time in Korea, you found yourself in a very harrowing experience at the base of Pork Chop Hill. Can you relay those experiences?
We got to Korea and I was a combat engineer, but the people forgot about that and we became infantry because combat engineers can be either one. We had all the crew-served weapons that the infantry had, and we were cross-trained. So we didn't get around to laying any minefields or doing any good engineering work, but we did get around to being a grunt, first class. So when the order come down in April 3rd of 1953, by the way, the war was almost over. I don't know why we had to take that real estate, but somebody decided that, and being a good soldier, you don't question that. So they assigned me the eastern sector of Pork Chop. There's 5 fingers on Pork Chop Hill, facing north. And we started up that hill with 257 men. About 6 days or so later, we come off of it with 14. Those that didn't make it was either wounded or KIA. And it was almost a useless battle. I don't know, I couldn't count the number of Chinese we killed, but it was a large amount because they had a death wish, and I did everything in my power to accommodate them.
General Van Fleet heard of this also, and he came and paid a visit. And what were the results of that visit?
They asked me if I'd accept a battlefield commission. And I had some strings attached. One, I wanted to stay with my unit, which wasn't much of a unit at that time. And I wanted to keep my points, because you got 4 points a month if you was on the front line. And you could rotate, I believe it was 48 points. I also wanted to become the company commander. Again, there wasn't many to command. And I wanted to make my platoon sergeant, who survived, my first sergeant, which I could do anyway. And he looked at the colonel and says, "What do you think?" He said, "Whatever Freeman wants." I accept the commission, because that way it would lead me to become one of those that I was telling you about early.
You're obviously speaking about flight school. So you got back to the United States, and the Army let you go to flight school right away. Is that correct?
No. They had a I didn't understand the regulation. I didn't know it existed, but you could not fly if you were 6'4". The equipment was not built for you, but they had in mind a Super Cub at the time, I believe, because most of the aircraft that I flew, some of them I couldn't use a parachute, but that's okay. I didn't intend to jump anyway. But in 2 years, I waited, and the Army decided they needed more applicants and more pilots. Somebody figured out they were going to go to Vietnam probably about that time. And they lowered the standards, or lowered the regulation, the height requirement to 6 feet, and I immediately applied and was accepted. And I reported to the U.S. Air Force Training School in San Marcos, Texas. The Army didn't have a school at that time. 120 of us started, 62 of us graduated.
Well, let's jump ahead. You've graduated flight school, and you've gone through mapping missions all throughout the world, and you're in Boise, Idaho at this time, working with the National Guard. This is your retirement job. In 2 years, you're getting out, and you get a telegram. What does that telegram say?
Report to Fort Benning, Georgia in 3 days. You're assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile. And somebody didn't tell the Army that that was my retirement assignment, apparently. But being another good soldier, I reported, and I left a wife and 2 children, and she sold the house, jumped on a train, and came to Fort Benning, Georgia, and spent the next 2 weeks with me before we went overseas. So she's a pretty good soldier, too.
Well, now you're one of those pilots wearing the leather jacket, clean-shaven and well-fed, and so they put you on a nice airplane and sent you over to Vietnam. Is that correct?
No.
Oh.
Put me on a rusty baby flat top, they called it. And they put all our helicopters on top of the deck and put a cocoon around them. And 29 long days later, I reconfirmed that I still didn't like ships. It broke down. Now, the engines failed somewhere around north of Hawaii, I think they told us. And I prayed continuously for it to drift into Hawaii, but it never did. They repaired it, and away we went.
So get to port in Vietnam, and you're going to take the first helicopter off the deck. Can you relay that story?
we took the cocoons off the helicopters, of course, and my boss had already gone away. He was in the advanced course, Bruce Crandall, who is a member of this organization, by the way. And I got my helicopter, got everything lined up, and fired it up, and the autopilot wouldn't work. But I says, that's not going to keep me from leading this flight, and I did the manual throttle, and we could lift it off, hit the beach. I looked down at the jungle. I says, you made another mistake. Every joker in the world wants to shoot at you now. And it turned out I was pretty right.
Now, in one of our discussions, you were sharing with me that every mission that you flew in Vietnam was a combat mission except for one. Would you share with us that one non-combat mission?
I was tooling along with another pilot, formation of two, coming down the China coast. And it was the most beautiful day you've ever seen. Bright sunshine. The palm trees was waving in the breeze. And I was looking at the beaches and saying, my God, what a beautiful place for a resort. And why are these people shooting at each other when they could build a big resort there and they'd have people coming, knocking themselves over to get to that place? I looked to my right in the edge of the jungle, and there was a firefight going on, but it wasn't my fight. The A-1Es was working them over, a lot of artillery, a lot of smoke. Always three things about battle: the sound, the sight, and the smell. I could hear it, but I couldn't smell it at that point. And I got a call on the radio. It says, Serpent, is that you? Off to my, to the east. And who in the world knows who Serpent is except somebody did? And I says, yes, this is Serpent 2-6. What can I do for you? He says, I have a lot of wounded in this LZ here, and I would like somebody to help me out. We've ordered a medevac pilot, but they're some 50, 100 miles away down south someplace. I said, sure, throw some smoke. He says, be advised, the LZ is very hot. I said, well, it won't be any hotter for me than it is for you. With that, he threw a can of smoke, and I went in and landed. And immediately I figured out why he said it was hot. There was two machine guns, one from the quartering right, one almost dead center. And they started bringing the kids that was wounded to the helicopter. And there would be one in the middle and a soldier on each side dragging him because he had leg injuries. And they would shoot all three of them down. And we kept doing this, but eventually we got loaded. But in the meantime, my gunner was wounded in the shoulder. My crew chief, I looked back and his arm was dangling. I looked at my co-pilot and he had a bloody leg. And I felt like I had an accident in my pants because it was, but it was red instead of the other color. And I'd been hit with a bullet that come under my arm into the armor-plated seat that we had, and it shatters into little chunks. It's a Kevlar, I guess it is. But that will do a number on you. I took 11 rounds through the windshield, a total of 52 rounds in the aircraft. My co-pilot, he was a young warrant officer, Frank Marino. His eyes were about that big, and he reached and pulled the collective pitch. For those that don't understand helicopters, that makes you go up and down. And I reached and grabbed him. I says, no, Frank. And I says, we got to get the wounded on board. And a couple of minutes later, he did it again, and he was panicking. He was changing colors on me. And I pushed it down again. I says, no, Frank, we got to get the wounded loaded. He looked at me with the big hound dog eyes. He says, Ed, don't we count?
And for that mission, I believe you received both a Purple Heart and a Distinguished Flying Cross.
Correct.
For a non-combat sorting. Let's jump to November 14th. And if you can just describe what was going on then and the preparations for going into LZ X-ray and what you were expecting and what actually occurred.
The intel was, says there's possibly enemy in the area. That was a good briefing, huh? So it was a Sunday morning. I didn't realize that for 20 years later, but it was Sunday morning, about 9 o'clock, 9:30. And we had a 16-ship formation, and we went in and started inserting the infantry in this area that we call Landing Zone X-ray. And 4 lifts we put in there, which constituted about 375 soldiers. On the fifth lift, and of course all this time I'm looking and there's nobody shooting. We had prepped the LZ with artillery and the gunships on each side and doing their thing in case somebody stuck his head up, we'd take it off. And I'm saying, boy, this is a cakewalk. Oh, this is so nice. The fifth time we landed in there, they hit 38 of the helicopters at one end. And a lot of we only lost one helicopter that couldn't get out, but a lot of damage and a lot of wounded. We straggled back and went to the pickup point again to where we had been. It was a 13-minute flight each direction. And licking our wounds and seeing what was going on and figuring out what we had left that would fly. And I knew that they couldn't hold out without ammunition and water, and especially ammunition, because they had a basic load of ammo was all that each GI carries into the landing zone. And sure enough, a minute I got ahead of myself. Colonel Moore called, says, no more helicopters in the landing zone. You can't survive. But and I'll fast forward there again. Well, knowing that this couldn't happen, he had to have help, or it was going to be another Custer's last stand. It was, by the way, Custer's old outfit, 1st to the 7th Cavalry. So we got squared away, and I found a helicopter that would fly with not too many bullet holes. Loaded ammunition, water, medicine, and lots of as much as it would haul, and was just standing by. We got a call, and he says, I need a volunteer to come in and bring the equipment I just described. And it was deafening, the silence was. And I was the oldest man in the organization. I was the only man that had ever been in combat. So they kindly looked up to me, and I just walked out, and I said, I'll take it to my commander. And my crew started walking towards the helicopter, and I says, this is volunteer mission, get out. They said, no, sir, we're crew, we're going with you. I said, well, it may be the longest day of your life. Yeah, we know that. I said, maybe the last day of your life. Yes, we know that. We fired the machine up. 14.5 hours later, I shut it down after the last landing in the zone. Was at 10:30 at night to a flashlight helped by one of the kids in the landing zone. The colonel came out and hollered in my ear, says, I can hold out till daylight. Don't make any more flights in. I started to kiss him. But I didn't.
During that, as the battle unfolded, Colonel Moore called the Broken Arrow event. What did that mean, and what did you see?
Of course, I was monitoring the radio and shuttling in and out. And when he said Broken Arrow, the code, that was a code for all air support in the country of Vietnam to come to landing zone X-ray. And trust me, there was a lot of airplanes because they were stacked up, jockeying for position to get in. And it was one heck of a battle, if you could imagine. They took turns coming in. We even got napalm, which did some collateral damage and friendly fire, really. But the battle raged for the next 3 days. We lost 308 killed. I don't know how many wounded. And they estimated they lost about 2,000, but it's hard to say. There were 3 regiments of those people, by the way, and the odds turned out to be about 10-to-1 odds against the number that we had in there. Now, the second day, though, we began to move the perimeter out, the infantry did, and was able to almost routinely bring lift ships in and put more infantry in. And, of course, that was the thing to do, and that gave more people on the ground a better chance to contain those people that come in waves. It was certainly trying to annihilate them.
Now, we had the chance to see the movie We Were Soldiers in our leadership class here. How accurate would you say that portrayal of the events in November 1965?
I give it 85%.
And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions that we might have if the mic handlers can come down.
Oh, no question.
Yes, sir. Major Dennis, Seminar 14. In the film, I believe your character is portrayed as pulling a sidearm on another medevac pilot. Did that actually occur?
That was my boss. And had it occurred, I would have taken a weapon away from him and did the work myself, but it didn't occur. There were some words passed, yes. Like they refused to go into the landing zone, and it was there, and I'm not blaming anybody. It was the policy of that organization at that time. It was a hot LZ, they wouldn't go in it. So I wanted to transfer to that outfit. Not good.
Well, sir, as we close out this afternoon, do you have any parting words for the class?
Just happened. I've got a note here that in case I have a senior moment, I've scratched some stuff down to tell you. I'd like to thank the United States Air Force for this tremendous award that is about to be bestowed upon me. Included in that thanks is Major Cox and his wife Sharon. Albert Einstein once said, as long as there are men, there will be war. I think he was pretty close to right. This nation was born under revolution and revolt, but we grew up under freedom. And I believe that the youth of tomorrow will fight equally as well as the youth of yesterday to preserve the freedom that we cherish so well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of the class of 2004, present you with your medal. Thank you.
Whoa.